Hi everyone and welcome to One Autistic Person. The video today is going to be more of a little bit of just a discussion piece from my sort of thought process of something that sort of occurred to me over the last few weeks. And that is the link between, potential link, or a link that I'm starting to see from myself personally, the link between socially masking and masking my autism, but also potentially that leading to me masking symptoms of a physical condition that I'm currently looking at. I feel like everything that I'm going through on these videos at the moment is sort of linking back to going through looking at conditions, but what's happened since my sort of exploration of autism, or how autism was affecting me, is made me much more open to looking at the fact that there may be other conditions that I haven't seen or noticed, and how that can be the case, especially when those things have been there since childhood. And one of the things that I'm exploring at the moment with my doctor, and my GP is pretty sure that this is the case, that I probably have a condition called hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have no notes on this video, so I just want to talk on this one. I don't want to have any kind of structure to it. I just want to talk it through because it's quite a big realization for me, and I don't want to be distracted by something written in front of me that I need to sort of refer back to, because I know that I can quite often sort of get stuck in that reading, and not my head doesn't clear enough for me to be able to get into that flow state of discussing things. But that aside, the thing with it is that I couldn't understand how, because it causes pain. That's one of the biggest things, and it causes fatigue. Now, I've known that I've been fatigued for years, but I've also automatically related that to the fact that I have anxiety and depression. But it's made me start thinking, when I was discussing this with my doctor, about how could this have been the case, because it's something that would have been there forever. Now, the biggest thing that's linked this for me is the fact of, as the doctor put it, she said double jointed, and then she said, but I put it as one of the parts of it is that you have hypermobility in your joints. That's why it's called hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So, but when she said that, I was like, yeah, I am double jointed. And she said, did you have party tricks when you were younger? And I did. A lot of them I can't do as well now because of, well, I've put weight on for one thing. I used to be very thin, or I was very thin until until probably about 18 months ago. But when I was younger, it didn't hurt as much. Now I can, yeah, this is gross by the way, but I don't know whether you can see that, I can dislocate, and you won't be able to hear it, but it clicks. So I can dislocate my thumb, and I used to be able to twist it all the way around, so it was kind of backwards, and I could pull it past here. I'm not going to do it now because I'll be in pain afterwards, but I could do that with all of my fingers. I could basically turn them pretty much all the way around, and my arm could turn all the way around, and I did it with my foot. I used to walk with one foot backwards because I thought it was funny. My knees have always clicked and hurt. My elbows, the same thing. I've always had major issues with my shoulders, and I always thought it's because I carried tension in them, and I always had knotted muscle structure there and things like that, but the doctors could never find a proper reason for it. I could put my whole hand underneath my shoulder blade and just keep it under there. I used to think that was funny when I was a kid. All of these things have probably made this condition much worse for me as I've got older. I've always had dropped arches, so if I sit in certain positions, the arch of my foot does go up, so I don't have an actual flat arch, but what will happen is suddenly I'll experience a huge amount of pain to the point of where I have to slam my foot into something so that it pushes it back in, and then keep it pushed on it, and it can be that agonizingly painful that it makes me vomit. Both the arch dropping and that happening. My fingers sometimes will just suddenly start going like that and separating apart. The same with my toes. I've had shoulder pain the whole way through my life. I get tension headaches a lot, which is another part of it. Also, I now have a hammer toe, which basically means my toe. If my thumb was my toe, my big toe, then this one, the first one in on both feet. The first one went just one night, just suddenly crept over, and I saw it. I watched it go over. It hurt while it was happening, and it's never gone back. And now my second one's doing it, but much slower on the other foot. So there's that. And my foot used to do the same thing with, like, my fingers. Like I say, they'd separate out like that. And my toes would separate from each other, and you can actually watch it happening. And again, that was really painful and uncomfortable. My hips, I've always had issues where I've said, oh, my hip feels like it's going to pop out. potentially it could be that it was slowly getting to a point of dislocation, and because I've stopped before doing anything with it. So basically, all of those things have been there, but I've kind of downplayed it. And the other thing was, when between the ages of 9 and 13, I pretty much daily had agonising growth, what my family, what my doctor saw as growing pains. To the point of crying, and I would sit in tears. I wouldn't be able to move. I had to have different lotions and things rubbed into my legs to try and stop them from hurting. It was mainly my legs, but it was at the joints, and it was constant. It was all the time, and obviously they just thought it was growing pains. But actually, I would expect that if I had 3 or 4 years worth of growing pains, I would expect myself to be taller than I am. I'm 5'11", 6 foot at a push, depending on what time of the day that I measured. So I'm an average height for a man. So that makes no sense. Why would I have had growing pains? And I didn't suddenly grow. I sort of was just constantly in pain. And I thought that just stopped. What I think happened is I learned how to mask that pain, and how I used to start to ignore it. And I'll get to why that is in a second, why I've done that for many, many years. And also how I could go through all this time without realising it, but kind of realising it. The other thing is that really has concluded it for me, that it possibly is this. And again, with my doctor agrees that this probably is what it is. We just need to get somebody to have a look at it who's a specialist. But I wet the bed continually until I was about 13, which is extremely embarrassing. And this is one of the biggest parts of this whole situation, is embarrassment. It's extremely embarrassing to say that I wet the bed constantly until I was 13, and I still do it sometimes. And not because I've drank alcohol, not because I've taken sleeping medication or anything like that. It just sometimes happens. And I have had issues with not being able to get to the toilet quick enough. If I am not able to get to it and my brain knows I'm not close to a toilet, I will wet myself, which is something else that happens to people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That sometimes that you can evacuate your bladder for no apparent reason, because there can be also issues internally. I pretty much tick every box when I've really looked at this and thought about it. But it made me feel like a hypochondriac, because I thought, why have I not known that these things happen? But I knew all of these things happen. I just saw them in isolation because I didn't experience them all at the same time. And if I did, I thought, well, that happens sometimes and that happens sometimes. And I kept them all very separately. It makes absolute sense that things are happening to my body in relation to bones or tendons or muscles. And that they would all be linked. Of course, that makes absolute sense. Of course, being double jointed and being able to do the party trick things, they all make sense to why something would be skeletally or muscularly wrong with me, or would be a condition that affects those things. But it kind of brings me on to the fact of the masking side of it. Now, and this is where the embarrassment bit comes in, but also the social conditioning that I've had. So I already feel like social interactions are really difficult. I struggle with the NHS. I struggle talking to people in authority. I struggle with having conversations that are awkward, where I'm going to have to advocate for myself. All of those things have been difficult from a child. And that comes from sort of being told by my parents unintentionally, don't moan about these things. And if I see something as moaning, then I don't do it. So being in pain is something you moan about. Wetting yourself is something that's embarrassing. Saying you're in pain is something that's embarrassing. So I've then become conditioned to not say those things, so therefore ignore them. And I'm extremely good at being able to socially mask, but it is damaging to me. And so if I'm able to do that, then obviously I'm able to mask pain. Social interactions and the way that things are, it's learned behaviour, but it's intrinsically there and part of neurostructures. But so is pain. So they work similarly. And if I am experiencing negative social interactions because of the fact that I'm in pain, it doesn't mean I stopped feeling that pain. And like I say, I felt all of those things and have done throughout my life. These have all been problems for me. I didn't make the link and just tried to deal with them individually and go, well, it'll be over and I won't have to deal with it. And actually what I have done is not dealt with them. I've just ignored them. Very similar to what I've done with my neurodivergent side of things. So that would then explain why I if I'm able to ignore that they're happening, that's going to then have an effect on my mental health, which is then going to have a negative effect on the way that I experience the world, and it will make the things like sensory processing and just processing in general, processing information, much more difficult. Because if you're unaware that you're in pain, your brain is still aware of that. It's still fighting against it and stopping you from feeling it. So you're still having the effects of being in chronic pain and having the fatigue that comes with that, but not knowing why, as well as the fact that you're also dealing with the fact that you are masculine when you're neurodivergent. There is no wonder that I have been in burnout. So it kind of brings me back to the main reason for this this video, and I'm going to do another video about masking, but from a different angle. Which is going to be very similar to this. What I want to say is we are allowed to speak up. Just because it's difficult and because it might be socially awkward to do so, we need to speak to doctors. We need to tell doctors when something we are aware something's difficult, because they do actually listen. You do have to advocate for yourself in this country, in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in other countries as well, even when you have to pay for it in places like America, that it's extremely difficult unless you're paying a certain amount of money or you're willing to go down a certain route, that it's very difficult to be able to get somebody to agree to something. And quite often I find with the NHS, they want to not do anything that's going to potentially cost them money. And any condition that is diagnosed means that there's money attached to it. So if you give them everything they need to know and say, this is what's happening, and remember, you are not being a hypochondriac. Just because you have gone, I need to research this further, and then you realise that this is what's been happening to you, does not mean you're a hypochondriac, because that's how I felt. I felt like people have kind of said, well, you researched it and therefore that means that you now are feeling that. It's like, no, I was always feeling that, and that's the reason why I researched it. I know more about it now. I know why that's a possibility, that's the thing. I went to the doctor with 5 different things. Ehlers-Danlos is the only thing that makes sense. Everything else, there were things that I was like, I don't get this. This is not what I have. This isn't, I don't feel that. I don't have this. And I wasn't saying I had one of the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, because there's 13 of them, that it was more serious. I wasn't saying it was the most serious of all of these conditions. It's actually probably one of the least serious. They're all quite difficult to deal with, but I'm not looking for medication. I want to go down a physio route, and I want to look at fatigue management and pain management from a holistic perspective, which I think also helps as well. Me not just going, I want pain medication. I've had many pain medications over the years, and that's also helped me understand the fact that I was taking pain medication and not realizing why I was in pain. Like I say, shoulder pain for many, many years. But I just wanted to sort of say to anybody that's watching this video, speak to someone, whether it's somebody close to you, and sort of explain the situation to them, and they can come with you, they can support you and advocate with you, or even for you if you need them to. But just remember, you should be able to, you should be allowed to advocate for yourself. Yes, it's embarrassing. Yes, it's not something that you want to do to admit defeat in it, but it isn't admitting defeat. Asking for help is not admitting defeat. It's admitting you need help, and that will in the end make things better for you. And admit that, but you first of all have to admit these things are happening, and be aware of them. And I think as autistic people, quite often we like to research things in depth, and most people do that before their autism diagnosis, but you can do it with other things as well. If you feel there's something physically wrong with you, then research it. And you might find, because what's happening with research at the moment is that there is a lot of correlation. I'm not saying causation, but there seems to be a lot of correlation between certain physical conditions and autism, and whether they develop separately, and there's no actual causation reason, but there definitely seems to be a correlation between certain physical conditions, and Ehlers-Danlos is one of those things. So remember that you can mask pain as well as masking your social interactions. You could masking masking how you appear to the world is exactly the same as it is with pain as it is with social interactions. So thank you very much. As always, I'd love to hear your comments on this one. Really would like to hear whether anybody else feels this, if they feel differently to it, if you think that no, they're completely separate things and that this is not something that you agree with. Always love to read people's comments. That's the whole point of this. I'm one autistic person, and I want to hear from as many different singular autistic people as possible. So if you could comment, like, share, and subscribe, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.